Hello, YouTube family. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe if you like the videos. And you can ring the bell for notifications. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about where we are at with the $1.9 trillion Biden stimulus bill. It passed the House late Friday night, Saturday morning, on basically a party line vote. There were two Democrats in the House that voted against the stimulus bill, and there were no Republicans who voted for it. As far as the stimulus bill goes, people will start running out of federal unemployment assistance on March 14th. That is when the Democrats have it set to try and pass the bill by that date, which isn't really going to, it's not going to go into effect immediately. There are 4 million people who will lose benefits mid-March. Another 7.3 million people will lose benefits over the following 4 weeks, basically the next month thereafter. And as I was saying, the delay in passing the legislation is going to result in delays in people receiving the aid assistance from the package. It's the last package was passed in December, and as a number of people in the government have said, that caused a delay in when people receive the benefits. There's a gap there because the legislation is going to pass, and then you have systems that have to be updated, such as the unemployment assistance the government's been kicking in. Right now, it's an extra $300. This Biden package bumps it up to $400 per week, an extra unemployment assistance, and it will take time for state by state for them to update their antiquated systems and get them online to start sending out the extra payments. This package also for the expanded paid sick leave. The program expired in December of 2020, but employers get tax cuts till March of 2021. So as far as the expanded family sick leave, part of the relief that was last passed last year, it ended in December. It wasn't re-upped in the December package. However, employers who participated in that program of paying for sick leave, giving paid sick leave to people who got the coronavirus, they still get tax breaks into this year. That's one of the pieces where the corporations were given a better deal than the average person, which is not uncommon in Washington. And the eviction moratorium, which was expanded by executive order by Joe Biden until March 31st. And that's after he became president. He did an executive order that expanded the moratorium until March 31st. That executive order is being challenged in court, and that has yet to be decided on in the courts. There is $19.1 billion in the bill to help with back rent, another $10 billion to help people who are behind on their mortgages. That's an important part because you have people who lost employment, whether temporarily or permanent, and that's the thing. Some of the people who lost jobs, and it was expected to be a temporary loss of jobs, it ended up becoming permanent. And that includes here where I'm at in Las Vegas. You had some people that got laid off, and then as everything continued to not come back to normal, because there was this big push to open everything back up, that hey, we need to open the business back up, business has got to work like normal. just because you open the businesses don't mean people are going to show up and be consumers at those businesses. It just doesn't work that way. And so some of the job losses ended up being permanent layoffs. The labor market is still 10 million jobs below pre-pandemic levels. So we're over 10 million jobs still lower than what we were pre-pandemic. But with that, during this pandemic period, since February of last year till the end of February this year, now beginning of March this year, there are people who have entered the workforce. There are people who have aged into entering the workforce, whether teenagers or whether late teens, people who are graduating high school, people who are graduating college, and entering the workforce. So we're even further down because those people need jobs as well. And so the package passed the House. It's going to the Senate now. And how fast it passes the Senate is going to determine how fast people start getting aid. Like I was saying, in the middle of March, you have unemployment benefits that run out. And then for the next 4 weeks following that, there are other benefits that fade away as well. And the longer it takes to pass this legislation, the longer it will take to get systems updated and to have those benefit assistances go out and help people in public. And one of the big pieces in the bill is the $15 per hour minimum wage hike. You had Biden on a number of occasions say that the $15 per hour minimum wage will not end up in the final version of the stimulus bill. And perhaps he just knows the way the Senate works. He was in the Senate for nearly 40 years, and he understands it's not going to pass. My thinking, my perspective on it, is Biden never had any intention of increasing the minimum wage. That's one of those things that he says because people like it, but I don't know that he ever had any intention of it actually being put into legislation. He realized that it would not necessarily pass. The Senate, at least. In the House, perhaps it could pass the House, but the Senate. And so we were waiting last week for the Senate Parliamentarian to make a determination whether or not the $15 per hour minimum wage could be put into the bill and passed through reconciliation. That's the method the Democrats are using to pass this bill, which reconciliation, all that is it requires a lower threshold. It requires just a majority of votes, 51 votes as opposed to 60 votes to pass the legislation. And according to the Byrd Rule, anything that's passed through reconciliation must have an impact on the federal budget. The CBO did say that the minimum wage hike would have an impact on the federal budget, but nonetheless, the Senate parliamentarian said that it doesn't meet the requirements to be passed along with the bill in reconciliation. Now, about the Senate parliamentarian, that is a Senate staffer position that is hired, that someone selected for that position. No one's voted into the position. The Senate parliamentarian doesn't have any votes in the Senate and has zero power in the Senate. The Senate parliamentarian has no power. Senators can fire the Senate parliamentarian, can select a new Senate parliamentarian. It's just a position that's there. And in the past, you have had, because, I'm sure if Democrats end up overruling the Senate parliamentarian, you will have places like Fox News, you have the online talkers like the Dave Rubins and the Ben Shapiros railing about Democrats throwing out these long-standing, wonderful rules, all the tradition and whatever, and it's all nonsense. I mean, in the past, Republicans have just flat out fired the Senate Parliamentarian because they ruled something Republicans wanted to pass couldn't be passed the way they were doing it, that it violated Senate rules. And so, in their case, they just went and fired the parliamentarian. What the Democrats can do is just ignore the parliamentarian. The Senate parliamentarian's ruling is a suggestion at best. It's to say that putting the $15 per hour minimum wage in the bill doesn't pass the Byrd Rule. The Byrd Rule was named after Robert Byrd, a former senator, a Democrat senator. He had put in these rules for what can be passed through reconciliation. It's the Byrd Rule. That's all they're following. And rules are not part of the Constitution. They're not part of any long-standing tradition. It's rules. And every time the House and the Senate starts a new session, they can vote rules in, they can vote rules out. The rules are nothing. They're just arbitrarily decided rules that were voted in at some point in the past. They can be voted out at any given time. The same with the Senate parliamentarian. It's someone who's in a staff position in the Senate. You can follow what they recommend. You can ignore it. The people in the Senate can fire the parliamentarian, like I said, Republicans have in the past. That you can just say, yeah, I don't like your decision, I'm firing you. Rather than firing them, you can just overrule it. And so what you have is this fight over the $15 per hour minimum wage. I have another video where I talked about the minimum wage. I'm going to try to not rehash a great deal of what I said in there, but I believe we absolutely need the $15 per hour minimum wage hike. It's been nearly a decade since the minimum wage has been raised, and I mean, anyone who watches this who's working a job, imagine going for a decade without a pay raise. You know, the cost of goods and services are going to continue to go up because that's inflation. Inflation is always happening. So the prices are going to go up. If you don't get a pay raise, over time it just starts to become more and more difficult to get by, to make ends meet. You know, we have people in this country who are working in minimum wage jobs who are homeless. They're living in a car and working full time. It's absurd. I don't care what your perspective is, that is absurd. For someone to work full time in America and not be able to afford a place to live, utilities, food, the basic necessities to get by. That is absurd. And it looked like Senator Sanders, who is the head of the Budget Committee in the Senate, he has a great deal of power in that position. It looked like he was going to take the $15 per hour minimum wage out because of the ruling of the Senate parliamentarian. You had a lot of progressives. I believe the TYT network had a lot of their fans and followers tweeting at Bernie Sanders, asking him to not kill the $15 per hour minimum wage, that it was his thing to begin with. Bernie Sanders is the one who brought that into the national conversation when he ran for the Democrat nomination in 2015, 2016, and then again last year when he ran for the Democrat nomination. His policy proposals are extremely popular. The $15 per hour minimum wage is extremely popular. I think nationally it has over 80% support. The raise of the minimum wage, anytime it has been put into the vote, anytime it's been put onto the ballot as a ballot initiative, it's passed. Florida in 2020, Florida, a red state, in 2020 had an increase to a $15 minimum wage in their state. On the ballot initiative, it passed with like 61% support, 61 or 62% support. I mean, Democrats support it, Independents support it, Republicans support it. As far as the American people, there is not a lack of support. It's a very popular proposal. It looked like Bernie Sanders was going to allow it to get taken out of the Senate bill. He got pressure from the progressive left in this country, and he gave a nod to them and said, I'm listening, I hear what you're saying, and I will put the $15 per hour minimum wage in the bill as an amendment. So it will have to be voted on. I'll force the Democrats in the Senate to vote yes or no on it, because that's what progressives were wanting. What they were wanting were these Democrats who say, I 100% support it, to say, okay, then vote for it. You know, raise your hand and vote for it. And if you don't support it and you vote against it, then we know who's for it and who's against it. You know, you have Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Kirsten Sinema of Arizona, who have both said in the past they don't support the $15 per hour minimum wage. So whether it makes it into the bill as an amendment, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee. But it's going to force a vote. And Bernie Sanders is going to stand by his legislative proposal, which one of those is the $15 per hour minimum wage, and he is saying he will force a vote in the Senate on it through amendment. So he is listening to the voters, which Bernie Sanders is a populist. Populists are going to listen to the voters more often than the corporate Democrats and Republicans. A statement from Bernie Sanders on the parliamentarian decision. The idea we have a high-ranking Senate staffer deciding whether 30 million Americans get a pay raise is nonsensical, which I also agree with. It makes no sense that the parliamentarians making this decision. And I don't know that it's 30 million. I think it's 27, 28 million people who would end up with a pay raise from that minimum wage hike. And Bernie Sanders has also, since he's gone ahead and started talking about the $15 per hour minimum wage, the absurdity of the Senate Parliamentarian, he is calling on Democrats to, again, remove the filibuster. Because with only a 50-50 split in the Senate, it is unlikely Democrats will be able to pass very much robust legislation without getting rid of the filibuster. What the filibuster does is allows the party not in power to kill legislation. The filibuster has a history in the Senate, and, I mean, it's not that great of a history. I mean, as far as I know, the filibuster's start was allowing racist slave states to fight against legislation that would free slaves, fight against legislation that would give more rights to former slaves. I mean, the filibuster was used heavily in a very racially biased way against black people in America. So it's not exactly some time-honored tradition. The filibuster is not in the Constitution. The filibuster is not part of our grand democracy. Excuse me. The filibuster is another rule that is allowed or not allowed in the Senate. And the Democrats can get rid of it. And you have people saying, well, they shouldn't get rid of it because if they do it, then Republicans will get rid of it and pass stuff and say, well, they did it too. Which, I mean, that's going to happen. Eventually it will happen. You know, Republicans before, when Trump first took office, they had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. But they couldn't put together legislation that even all of the Republicans would support. They couldn't get a majority on some of their own legislation they tried to pass. You know, they initially started trying to work on killing the Affordable Care Act and replacing it with this watered down version of health care reform that Republicans came up with, which was basically no health care reform. It was just going back to the way things were mostly. And they couldn't even get a majority of their own party to vote for it, let alone get Democrats on board. So it wasn't going anywhere with or without the filibuster. And Bernie Sanders, as far as on the filibuster, he said we cannot have a minority preventing that from happening. That is, robust legislation getting passed that will help the overwhelming American population. There is a video clip I have. It's Bill Gates being asked about the stimulus package. Let's have a watch of it.
About the economy, Bill, do you think that, the big debate taking place now is whether we need a stimulus or a COVID relief plan as large as President Biden is proposing, 1.9 trillion. There are people who say the output gap is not that big. There are others who say, look, most of this is going toward public health and relief for people who aren't allowed to work. What do you think? Is it the right size?
Well, the government always has a hard time targeting exactly the people who are in need, and particularly if you're designing programs very quickly. There's no doubt there's some number of people who really are still suffering. Say it's 15% out there. The other 85% had the benefit of last year's stimulus activities, and the poverty rate's down, aggregate income levels are up. So it will be tricky when you want to move fast to be targeted. If you add this stimulus to the next round, the Build Back Better, that makes at least a few commentators worry about inflationary pressure. So I know there's a lot of good things in the stimulus bill, and the Build Back Better is going to have a lot of fantastic climate-related stuff in it. But I hope, we can target it better. And we are definitely getting to levels that those inflationary worries aren't crazy.
Okay, so with Bill Gates, you had him talking about, he would like to see the stimulus targeted more. That's as far as the $1,400 payments, which is part of the stimulus, the individual payments that goes out to Americans. And as a lot of people have pointed out, the problem with trying to specifically target that money to just the people who need it the most, one, is going to cause severe delays in getting the legislation passed and then getting it executed. Two, there are people who need the money who aren't desperate for the money. And like I've said before, talking about the stimulus, I don't know that there are very many working class, middle class, and lower income Americans who couldn't use an extra chunk of money. I mean, you have the situation where a majority of the country can't overcome a $400 emergency. I mean, there are people who need the financial assistance. Wages have been stagnant for decades. The cost of goods and services, the inflation has been consistently going up. And then you have the situation with the minimum wage, where it rarely gets raised. And there was a Republican at CPAC this weekend who tried to denigrate the idea of raising the minimum wage, talking about when he was a teenager, he got a job, he was making a lot less than the current $7.25 per hour minimum wage. When he finally made it to being a cook at a restaurant, he was only making $6 an hour, which is lower than the current minimum wage now. The problem with his argument is if you turn his teenage 1970s dollars into current dollars, that $6 per hour he was making in the 70s is over $20 per hour now. I mean, he's making the point that people need the income increase. Because when he was working and the minimum wage was lower, he was making a lower amount of money, everything cost a lot less. And so you take the money he made, translate it to today with inflation, and he was making the equivalent of over $20 per hour. So yeah, he was doing fine as a teenager, making that kind of money. If young people and older people who are working minimum wage today were making over $20 per hour, they would be doing all right. But that's not the case. And so even that guy trying to use his own anecdotal experience to denigrate the idea of increasing the minimum wage, all he did was give more support for the idea of increasing minimum wage. It needs to be increased. And so you have the package moving to the Senate. Bernie Sanders has said he absolutely will put the $15 per hour minimum wage in the package through an amendment, force people to vote yes or no on it, and eventually it's going to get through the Senate. It's going to have to go back to the House to be revoted on because there will be some amendments to it, whether they try and target the individual payments down more. And Joe Biden has come out this past week saying, or this past weekend, I think it was Jen Psaki, the representative for Biden, said that he is absolutely willing to target it more. He's willing to give that stimulus money to a lower amount of Americans than what Donald Trump did, which Republicans are fine with that. If the Democrats give a smaller amount of assistance than Republicans did, Republicans feel like it's a win for them. But Psaki, the spokesperson for the White House, said that Joe Biden absolutely was still willing to negotiate on targeting the aid. Something that I don't agree with. I mean, it can be given to the same people it was given to last time. And like I said, some people absolutely need it desperately. Some don't need it at all. That's fine. It's not like we're killing anything, destroying anything by giving it to the same people. But Biden's willing to negotiate and water down anything. And as it comes down to it, hopefully Kamala Harris, who is the president of the Senate, hopefully she will overrule the Senate Parliamentarian, get the $15 per hour minimum wage in the Senate bill. Hopefully Harris and Biden will pressure people like Manchin and Sinema to get on board, to vote for it, to pass it. And the thing is, once it gets put into the bill, the problem will be to get it out of the bill. Someone like Manchin and Sinema would have to vote to do away with the filibuster to get it back out of the bill, which would then be them going back on their whole thing of they don't want to get rid of the filibuster. And so for progressives, it's a win-win. You're getting the $15 into the $15 per hour minimum wage into the bill. In order for people to kill it, they have to try and kill stuff they said they weren't going to kill, like the filibuster. And hopefully we'll get it passed. We'll give the aid to the people who need it the most, and some aid will go to people who don't need it the most. But you know what? It's not going to kill them. I mean, Bill Gates was talking about targeting it more. That's fine and well for him. He's worth $160 billion, whatever he's worth. And he can wait for anything. He's not struggling. There are plenty of people who are struggling who've been out of work coming on to a year right now, and their prospects haven't gotten any better. Their jobs aren't coming back. There are not enough jobs coming back. The economy is still recessed, and putting more money into people's hands is what's going to help it get brought back to life. I mean, that's just the simple way of it. If you don't have money in people's pockets, you can open up however many businesses you want. They ain't going to get customers if people don't got the money. So hopefully we'll get this passed and on its way. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Have a good day.